Hi, Debbie. Thanks for spending some time with me this morning.
Hi,
So
Ray. How you doing?
I'm good. I just want to ask you, as we kick off, how would you describe yourself rhythmically in the kind of facilitator world?
Hmm. So, I wouldn't describe myself as a musician. And sometimes I wouldn't even describe myself as a drummer, even though drumming is what brought me into this. I would say predominantly I'm a facilitator. That's where I'm coming from. I started off as a person-centered facilitator. That's where my background was. And then I came into the drumming, and what I did is I then used drumming as a tool, brought that into my facilitation. So I kind of combined the drumming and the facilitation. So if I was to kind of, put it into a phrase, I would say I facilitate rhythm. I would call it like a therapeutic rhythm-based facilitator.
Okay. And how did
Does
you
that make
kind of,
sense?
no, 100%. How did you kind of find your way onto this kind of journey?
Okay, so that's interesting because I've thought about this quite a lot, as in how on earth did I get here? I mean, if somebody had whispered into my 13-year-old ear or my 25-year-old ear, in 10 years' time or 20 years' time or 30 years' time, giving away my age, you would be facilitating, music groups to literally hundreds of people, and in the areas that I specialize in, I would have said no way, because there was absolutely nothing in my background or in my childhood. I can't even pretend that music played a massive role. It did. It was in my life. I have two Irish parents. We lived in Birmingham, so I had Irish music and rebel music, and we were raised with that kind of vibe. So, and as an adult, I went back to live in London. I came home to live in Ireland when I was about 13. As an adult, went back to live in London. And at the weekends, I would go down to Covent Garden and different places, and I'd watch musicians on the street, and I'd watch drummers, and I always had them on kind of a pedestal. Like, I used to look at them and think, oh my God, they're so amazing. They're so skilled, and I felt small. I felt small, like it was, there's no way that I could be that. And the reason I say this is because it's such an important aspect that I weave in. It's kind of an understanding that I work from this space now, because I did not know back then, that I had this potential. I had no idea that I had musical or rhythmical potential, none whatsoever. There was no indications, no signs. So my background was, as I said, I started off as a person-centered facilitator. I was facilitating a lot of bereavement groups with children who were going through separation, divorce, and things like that. So that's where I got my original training from. And then one day, a group of friends decided that they were going to go to a day workshop of African drumming. And my children were very young at the time, so I got a babysitter in, prepared everything for the day off, was all ready and set to go. And the morning of the workshop, the rest of them, believe it or not, actually rang to say, we can't make it. So I was driving down to this day-long workshop of African drumming, and I was thinking, what the bleep are you doing? Are you off your bleeping head, leaving your kids? There's work to be done. There's like windows, housework. I could have found 101 lists of things that I needed to be doing. So I hadn't learned anything about surrender at that stage. That hadn't even come into my consciousness. So I was driving down, and I was really quite stressed going. But the only reason I went is because I had paid the money, and there was no way I wasn't going to go. And I walked in to this room in this venue, and there was a circle of drums. And first of all, visually, the visual impact of it, I cannot describe it, Ray. It was just something hit me in the depth of my stomach. The visual impact of it woke me up. Was terrifying, but it woke me up. And then I met Maxine, who turned out to be my teacher, and she actually had, her business was called Work Rhythms. She's the lady who eventually handed it over to me. Maxine was the facilitator that day. But when we started to drum, the emotions that came up in me, I cannot describe them. It's just, I was actually trying to hold back tears. I was sitting there thinking, what the hell is going on here? I couldn't understand what was, because I'm a very logical person, I'm very grounded, but it felt like coming home. I was home. Absolutely, 100%, I was home. And it was such an emotional experience. It literally pulled the rug out from underneath my feet. And I say this genuinely, that day was life-changing. It changed the track of my life 190 degrees. You know, now, 20 years later, that was in 98, 99, 20 years later, I absolutely see it as the universe saying, now, Debbie, here we go. This is what you're meant to be doing. They woke me up as in, now, we've got work to do. It was a preparation. It was a massively major transition moment in my life. And it's so simple.
How's that continued?
How has it continued? I don't understand that question.
That's okay.
How is it?
So that's how you joined the path. How's that path kind of continued and developed and moved on?
Oh, okay, that's good. That's different. How's it continued? So from there, I kept going to Maxine's workshops, and as I was in the workshops, I kept thinking, I'd watch Maxine work, and she was absolutely brilliant. But and we're still good friends all these years later. But there were certain times I'd be like, I would do that differently if that was me. What was happening was the birth of the facilitator, because I was watching the people in the group, and I was going, oh gosh, she's just missed that. That person over there is struggling, and oh, she's missed it. So my antenna as a facilitator was being birthed. And sometimes, you know, it's not that I kind of stepped in, but I had to hold myself back because I couldn't, the facilitator and the part of me just was like a butterfly bursting out of a cocoon, is the only way I can describe it, was struggling to express, you know. And I remember Maxine at one stage saying to me, you know, you should be doing this. You should be doing this. But as we all know, it's that journey of confidence. So what happened then is Maxine introduced me to a really excellent community in Ireland called Tribal Spirit. I have to give credit to John Bowker. He was a massive influence on me. He probably is to this day one of the best facilitators I have ever experienced. You know, in my life, I've seen this man take groups and bring them from a group of strangers to a depth of intimacy and sacredness. You know, so I will always have to credit John Bowker. So I became involved with the Tribal Spirit community, and that was a massive journey for me. You know, it's very hard to synopsize it, but you know, that was a very big influence. As a facilitator, I watched his skill. I watched him. Eventually, I went out on my own. Gosh, this is a long story. You ask me questions because I could just kind of tell the whole story, but you know, ask me questions. So it was kind of an evolution. Then I went out on my own. There we go.
So who's influenced you on your journey? So you've mentioned John Bowker. You mentioned the lady you first introduced, and how those influences have built up to where you are today.
Very pivotal point in my growth as a facilitator. You know, that completely changed the way I facilitate, changed my life really, was at that point I was teaching polyrhythms. I was running regular workshops in a local venue, teaching polyrhythms, putting African rhythms together, and, you know, kind of honouring the traditional culture. And this man came into my workshop one day, and he looked like an accountant. He was a very tall man with a suit on him. And he walked in and he said, I've been dreaming about drumming for years. I can't believe I found you. I've been dreaming about drumming. So I said to him, you're very welcome. He sat down and I started to teach the rhythm. And now when I was teaching polyrhythms, I would always start with the simplest rhythm for a heartbeat to the more complex rhythm. I'd teach maybe about 4 rhythms, simple to complex, and then people could choose where they wanted to be. Then we'd put it together and we'd go on a journey with that particular rhythm. But this man could not even access a simple heartbeat. He couldn't access it. He was so stiff in his body and rigid, and he just couldn't relax into it. And I would try and kind of subtly stop the group and try and weave him back in. I didn't want him to be on the outside of the rhythm. And I tried so many times to weave him back in. And I don't know if you've any experience with polyrhythms, but when you have polyrhythms, they have got to lock together tightly for them to actually sit. And if somebody's out, it's almost like the cogs in the wheel don't sit. So he was always out. So there was an element of chaos. So I would try and keep weaving him in. And at one point, I actually took him on his own one-to-one before the workshop, and would spend half an hour with him trying to get him to relax, into, being able to access the rhythm. He just couldn't do it. Eventually he stopped coming. And I never forgot him, because I deeply felt like I failed that man, because that man did not fit into my box. He came into my workshop and so passionate about wanting to drum, but he couldn't fit into the space I was providing, because it was actually a rigid space. I was providing a space where you have to learn these rhythms, you have to play accurately, we'll join all the rhythms together, and then we have a nice experience. What I wasn't allowing for was the individual chaos that people were bringing with them. So the only people that could fit comfortably into the workshop I was providing at the time were people who could comfortably access rhythm. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. And this man didn't, because he was in chaos. And I really felt like I had let this human being down. So I decided to retrain. I decided that I was going to change my method, that I was not going to teach rhythms anymore. And I came across then, that's when I came across the Arthur Hall of village music stuff. And I went to Scotland as well. I think I met you guys first. I went to Scotland and I watched all these facilitators in Scotland that weekend. And I didn't get up, I don't know if you remember that weekend, not once did I get up and facilitate. I never got into the circle once and facilitated, because that's not what I was there for. I wasn't there to show my skill. I didn't care what everyone in Scotland thought about my facilitation skills. I was not interested. I was not there to say, look what a good facilitator I am. I was there to learn. And I watched everybody, and some people blew me away. They blew me away with their skill. And I took everything away from that weekend. And I thought, I have found a method that is, I'm going to take this method and use it. And what I did is took what I learned and I went to Scotland a couple of times, and I loved the Arthur Hall approach. I really did. But each time I went, I did not go into the circle and facilitate. I did not try and show them, I literally just watched and took. And actually, I think Arthur even said it to me one day. He said, you're just taking everything you need from here. And, and I said, yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to take what I need and bring it back and adapt it. And that completely changed. Being introduced to the Arthur Hall method completely changed the way that I work. But what I did is I didn't imitate Arthur Hall's method. I didn't imitate anyone's method. I created my own. And out of that, I created a space that no matter who walks into my circle, no matter how chaotic they are, no matter how brilliant they are at rhythm, no matter how disjointed their access to their rhythm is, it doesn't matter. There is a place for every single ability in my circle. And in a circle that I create, the person who is the serious djembe player is actually no different than the person who is, banging away off beat, off rhythm. Yeah. Because actually that person who's banging away off beat, off rhythm is possibly the most spiciest person in the room and giving us the spiciest sound in the room. It doesn't mean the djembe player is the superior, because in my mind, that person is superior because they're playing their own beat. Does that make sense? So that was a very pivotal changing point in my life. It was possibly the two most pivotal changing points was meeting Maxine and doing the drumming day one, and then this man walking into my circle completely changed the way I facilitate, changed me as a facilitator, changed my approach, changed my perspective, woke me up to the reality of, I want a circle that's inclusive to every single ability. I don't want anyone to leave my circle like that man left my circle, failing him. I don't want to fail anyone that walks into my circle. Nothing is black and white. There's so many parallel journeys that weave into who we are and what we become. So there was there was a lovely lady in my world called Rachel Parry, a very wise woman, and I learned a lot from her wisdom as a woman, and it made me realize that I became very conscious of facilitators, because I'd had some really bad experience of facilitators. I mean, really bad experiences. And it put me on a journey of, I started to explore, there was a stage in my life when I really explored, you know, ethics of community work and the ethics of facilitation and the ethics of taking a group. Because when you're dealing with music and you have a group in front of you, you have a very powerful tool in your hands. Rhythm is a very powerful tool, because, I mean, I've seen it in 20 years. I've seen people cry. I cried the very first day. It brought up emotions, and I've seen that happen. So whether you're, you know, and you know this, where I work more in very specific areas. It's, for me, it's a profession. It's a profession. I'm not just someone rocking up with a load of drums. I'm a professional facilitator, you know, qualified, and I go into professional spaces. So for me, I'm so conscious of the ethics behind facilitation, and my journey was, for me to grow, I had to experience very bad facilitation and very bad ethics in facilitation. And that set me on a very deep journey of exploring communities and leadership, especially leadership. You know, what makes good leadership? And I have to say, Rachel, for me, was a huge influence in that way, as in exploring what leadership was, and especially feminine leadership. You know, because there's absolutely no doubt that men and women facilitate differently.
100%.
You know, and I can't say there's a wrong and a right. It just is. But I'm biased. I'm a woman, so I actually think that women facilitators better. In many ways, in certain circumstances. You know.
I would kind of agree with that. I would agree with that. But I just want to go back on the ethical side of community, and the ethical side of leadership, and the ethical side of facilitation. Do you think the movement has kind of realised as it's grown, or that there's a responsibility in the work that we do?
So when you say the movement, do you mean globally facilitators?
I mean globally, kind of rhythm facilitators, and I mean rhythm, and not just drum and choir facilitators, and your experiences and the people you've come in contact with during this work.
So when you say have we moved on, do you mean do I think everyone is aware of the importance of ethics?
I think, yeah, let's start with that one.
Okay, I'm not sure that they are, because and this is not a criticism, but I'm not sure that they are, because ethics is not something that's woven into trainings, and there's not that many training out there for people doing this stuff. I know there's the Arthur Hall training, and that's very much you know, technique and method, and I'm sure there is ethics for the mentors. I'm not sure about that. I haven't done it. I'm sure that they approach it from the ethical side, but there's not a lot of training for people who are using rhythm as a tool, and drumming and percussion. I think the ethics comes from the person themselves, and I don't know, you know, do I know whether people are working ethically? I can only hope, but I know myself that, I mean, I've often said this too, that one of my desires really would be to set up a training course for facilitators working with rhythm and percussion and vulnerable groups, and, you know, especially in the areas of mental health and well-being, because I think that's a very important topic. Because going back to what I was saying to you about, you have the tool of a facilitator is a very powerful role. You know, you're taking the energy of a group and you're molding it and manipulating, and you're bringing it somewhere, because that's what we do as facilitators. We go into a room, we have a group of people, we have an intention, and we're bringing that group on a journey somewhere. So that gives us a lot of power. Now, you know, that's a whole other topic. We could spend hours talking about the manifestation of power and how, you know, people deal with that. But but when I'm still on ethics. So I know when I go into a group that I am so responsible for every person's well-being in that group. And, you know, the journey that I'm going to be bringing them on, it has to be based from a deeply, deeply ethical place, that no one gets hurt or damaged, or that I, as a facilitator, I'm totally aware that when they leave this group, they leave the experience, that, you know, they leave safely. And they leave, you know, with a sense of they've trusted me, they've trusted the space. And ethically, as I said again, the rhythm, the tools, the drumming, they are so powerful, those tools, that if we are going to bring someone on a journey, and you know, we've had this discussion again, that, you know, I know that I can go from, I can have 20, 30, 40 people in a room, and within a space of an hour and a half to 2 hours, we're in a very deep space rhythmically. We're almost touching a sacred space. No one's putting the word on it, because it's not necessary to introduce that word into the space, but it's there. Don't ask me to define sacred, because that's a whole other discussion as well. But there is a taste of sacredness in the space. And you know, again, when you're bringing people to that space, you have to have a deep moral, ethical, self-aware base, you know, an ability to be self-aware, self-reflective, and absolutely 100% a radar of consciousness about every individual in that room. Does that make sense?
No.
It's such a big topic to me, and you know this because we've had loads of discussions on this. It's such a big topic to me that it's very hard to condense it.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think it's important that we touch on it, both the awareness, the personal responsibility of the work that we do. How do you feel that who you were when you started and who you are now?
Okay, and that's very interesting, because when I started, it was the love of the rhythm and the love of the drumming that was driving me. The facilitator was still a baby, you know.
Yeah.
And as I said before, I experienced different types of facilitation, and I absolutely began to learn this is not how I want to be. You know, I experienced facilitation that to me was so unsafe that it made me go away and say, how can I not be that way? So that set me on a journey of, you know, learning. I sought out facilitators. I went and I experienced as many. I can't name them to you because there's so many. I sought out facilitators who I could watch. I watched, and it was like an a la carte. I took what I was like. I'd watch something. I go, I really like what you just did. I'm going to take that, and I would take it back, and I would sit with it and go, I'm going to weave that into the way I work, into my workshop. So actually, what happened over the 20 years, and it was 20 years, is every time I would see something in somebody, I really like what you did, I would say, I'm going to take that. Or if I saw somebody facilitating and I was like, oh wow, that didn't work, it made me very self-aware. I'm never going to do that. So in a sense, my intention was never to do damage. I came from a place of no harm. And I think what's happened over the years, it's molded me into a person of just a level of awareness now that I bring with me, of a level of awareness of what I don't want to be, what I don't want to happen, you know, what I want to be, what I want to happen. And that's the difference. Is now I am totally aware. I'm awake. You know, that I don't know what that word woke means. I have no idea. But when I say I'm awake, I don't mean I'm woke, because I don't know what that means. I see it all over the internet. That's not what I mean. When I say I'm awake, it means that when I walk into a workshop, whether it's an acute psychiatric unit or a prison centre, I'm walking in there and I am in the space, in the zone. I'm a professional. I'm walking in with a professional hat on me. My equipment and my instruments are the tool that I'm using, and I am 100% aware. of that space, from the minute I walk in to the minute I leave. And that's the difference. I'm not going in. 20 years ago, I was kind of going in blindly. This time I'm going in, I'm totally aware of the relationship I'm creating with these people. When I walk into this space, I am conscious of the relationship, you know, from the minute that person walks into the room, you know, and I, the facilitator, walk into the room, it's an absolute space of awareness of all the levels of elements that take place in a group, the dynamics, the energy, all the things that unfold, the chaos they give me, my responsibility to weave that chaos into something rhythmical, into an experience that's a positive experience. I didn't have that awareness 20 years ago.
If you could have a conversation with the Debbie that started out as a facilitator now, what would you share with her?
Honestly, Ray, nothing.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why, nothing. And I'll tell you why, because who are we to take away somebody's journey? You know, actually, interesting as you say that, because I used to tell this story to my kids, the story of the little boy who was given the gift of a cocoon with a butterfly in the center. Yeah. Somebody gave him the gift, and he was looking at this cocoon every day, and he'd see this little creature inside struggling to get out, and he felt sorry for the creature. So he opened up the cocoon, and out fell a brown, wet, dirty butterfly that died. And he went back to the person who gave it to him, and he said, you know, this butterfly is dead, it didn't live, and you've sold me something, you know, faulty. And the old man who sold it to him said, no, he said, you didn't have the patience to allow the butterfly to struggle, because in the struggle the butterfly, you know, developed its strength and its beauty, and to get out of the cocoon the butterfly has to beat its wings, and in the beating of its wings it gains strength and color. So when you say to me, would I go back and say something to Debbie, I wouldn't, because the facilitator that I am now, I like, and I know my skill, and I know my and I don't say that with ego, and you know this, I don't say that with ego. I say it genuinely because I know that I have a skill that works, and so I couldn't have got here unless I had gone through all of the struggles and the experiences and everything to be here. So would I say anything to that? Absolutely no.
Yeah.
No.
Awesome answer. What do you feel are your particular strengths as a facilitator now, Debbie?
Strengths as a facilitator. I am very confident. I work with what the group gives me. And I know we've laughed over this because you have your mind maps and your plan Bs and your plan Cs and I don't, because I don't make a plan when I'm going into a group. I think simply because I've experienced over the years that the skill of a facilitator is having been able to adapt rapidly to what the group present. And I think that's possibly one of the things I've become very good at over the years. I can go into any group and kind of suss it out within the first few minutes, as in, this isn't going to work, I'm going to change track here. So that's, you know, I have that ability to very quickly adapt. And I think as well, over the years, another skill I have, and I hope this comes out correctly, because this could sound, but I have absolutely no issues with failure. Now, I don't ever see failure in a group. I don't believe there's such a thing as failure, you know, in my groups. I can only speak for myself, really. And the reason being is, if something's not working, I am so honest with the group and so comfortable and so relaxed. And I'll say to the group, you know what, guys, this isn't working, and let's try something else. So, you know, it's a kind of a realness. I'm real as a facilitator. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, you know. So this women's weekend, we had brought women from all over the country who were in domestic violence situations and direct provision, and we brought them together to sing, and it was a very nourishing weekend. But at the end of the weekend, Rachel, the woman I mentioned earlier on, who was a great mentor to me, she took me aside for you could call it supervision, you know. It was kind of you know, process of how do you feel that went and discharging, because facilitating is a very high energy thing when you're holding space for so many people. And she paid me a compliment, or she pointed out something which kind of was life-changing. She said to me, you have a very unique style. She said, you facilitate from behind. She said, you have a very deeply feminine style of facilitation. You facilitate from behind. And I didn't understand what she meant at first, you know, but I do now. So I think what makes me kind of unique is that I'm not out there going, you know, hey, look, I'm the facilitator and I'm such a good drummer, because I'm actually not. You know, I love creating a space where, okay, I'll give you an example. If you're asking me, you're still asking me what makes me kind of unique. I used to run weekend workshops for about 7 or 8 years. I ran many weekend, I'd maybe do about 4 or 5 a year, of where we'd come together, lock ourselves into a venue for the weekend and drum and dance and cook and all kinds of things. And I used to run New Year's Eve workshops where people would come for the New Year and celebrate. And I remember at one workshop, the New Year's Eve were family workshops, so children were allowed. The other ones during the year were just adults. And I remember this particular workshop was New Year's Eve. One of the children turned around to her mother and she said, Mum, who's the boss of this weekend? And I just thought it was a fabulous compliment, because it was my weekend. I was the facilitator it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday into the Monday morning. It was my role to take this group and, you know, guide it through the whole weekend. But I could do it in a way where I could step up to the leadership where required, then blend back in, you know, allow somebody else to take leadership if they needed in different areas, you know. So it wasn't all about, you know, I'm the facilitator, I'm completely in charge. I'm not very good at describing this, because it's a different type of leadership. It's facilitation from behind. And that's I think that's possibly one of the most unique things I do, is that when I'm in a group, can I tell you another story on that, to give you another example? How are we doing on time?
No, just keep going.
Okay, so another example of this is there's a particular group that I used to work with of teachers, and every month or so we would have, they'd have like a PD, professional development, and I would go down to their school, and it was in the evening time, the kids all gone, and I'd set up the space. So in the school I couldn't use real candles, so I'd use artificial candles. So I'd set up the space with a load of instruments, and they were coming into this very nurturing environment. I'm very good at creating space. That's one thing that I'm really good at. I'm actually good at the aesthetics and physically creating the space. When I walk into a workshop, I assess the space, and I have to push something into that space to create an experience that people are walking into. But anyway, so in this school, I would go in, set up the instruments, create the space. And what we started to do was we started to do this. It's a particular method that I use. I've developed a number of methods over the years that really work. But this particular method is where we would start, the group knew that once we start, the workshop is 2 hours long, there's no speaking, no talking, no one speaks for the 2 hours. And it would usually start with me, or I have a team that work with me sometimes. Victor, amazing guy, we'd have a set of junjuns beside us, and we'd start with a lovely bass rhythm. And then when people were ready, they added in whatever they wanted. So it's kind of layering like a rhythm stew. And then what we would do is people knew that in that space, they were completely free at any point to get up and leave what they were doing and move to another instrument. Okay, so it became a fluid space for people where there was movement in the space, like they'd play something, move to something else. And anyway, this woman came into the workshop, and she was about 15 minutes late, and she had never been there before. So she walked in the door, and I could see at the corner of my eye she was watching, and she sat on the nearest djembe she could find, and she was kind of playing with her fingertips, you know, because she wanted to make it. She wasn't quite sure, and she was watching the space, and she was looking to see who was the facilitator. And I could see her watching around because she was looking for someone to give her instruction. And I could see her watching, and she she couldn't figure it out. And then somebody moved from one instrument to the next, and you know, the rhythm kept going. We kept, you know, the pulse going, and I visibly saw her relaxing, because she realized that there was no rules in this space, and there was no one actually telling her, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to play. And she very quickly realized that, oh, this is I can play this, or I can move and I can play that. And within 10 minutes, she was so deeply involved in the rhythm and so deeply in that space, and she got up and she moved to something else. And that to me is facilitation. That to me is facilitation, because if somebody can walk into a room and not know who the facilitator is, yet the facilitator is still facilitating. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I absolutely love the concept of facilitation from behind.
Yeah.
You touched on something earlier in your kind of examples, and I want to sort of just delve into that a little bit. This idea of creating a safe space and the feel of the room and the energy of the group. How do you kind of work with that and create that?
Okay, so I'm quite a kinesthetic person. So when I go into it, if I go into, no matter where the workshop is, whether, as I said, it's a prison or a psych unit or a school, when I go in, I first of all have to look at the space that they give me, and I kind of do say in advance, these are the spaces that I like. This is the most suitable space. So I do lay that down at the beginning. But like, I couldn't go into the prison and light candles. Just absolutely not going to happen. But what I can do is I usually have, there's a method I have where I work from the outside in. So I'll have the set drums on the outside, and then I have another layer kind of in the inside. I normally have some kind of a centerpiece that's a central point, because in my workshops, we work from the outside in. So we start sitting on the chairs with the drums, and eventually we move in to the center where there's the more softer, quieter percussion. We go into a more sensual space. So visually, when someone walks into the room, not only are they seeing the drums, they're seeing this kind of, you know, centerpiece that's in the middle. It's a curiosity, as in, like, I can see that people just like, what? I just want to get in there and touch everything, you know. So the presentation to me is whether it's the light, I look at the light, I look at the seating. If I can, I'll bring in a light, I'll bring in a lamp, I'll bring stuff with me to create a space, you know. Does that make sense? Because it's very, very important that when people come into a space, that first of all, there has to be a sense of intimacy in that space for it to work. Now, again, this all depends on the groups that you're working with. If I was working with a large group, it's very difficult. But I still think that when you're using the tool of percussion and instruments, and you are going on a journey, no matter what the group is, you're going on a journey, there has to be a connection between the people in that group. Every person in that group has to have a relationship to everyone else in that group. Whatever level that relationship is, there is a relationship there. And for that to happen, when someone walks into a space, into the room, there has to be almost a sense of safety and intimacy. So one of the big things for me is privacy. The room has to be private. No windows, people looking in from outside, nobody walking in and out. You know, we're in that space, the door is closed. It's almost like we're cocooned in that space. Different if I'm in a space where there isn't a flow in and out, you know, that people need that, especially mental health, they need the freedom to leave if they need to. That's okay. But in the majority of spaces, everyone's in, the workshop is starting, door is closed, there might be a light, there might be a lamp, I might even have an artificial candle, depends. I might even have a real candle, depends on the group. But people know when they're entering into this space, there's a safety here. And door shut, now we're going on a journey. Does that answer your question?
That answers the physicality of it. But how emotionally do you kind of create that safe space?
How emotionally? How emotionally do I create the safe space? I think that the crucial element is trust. Because I get people coming in to workshops, and I'm sure every facilitator will say the same, and the first thing they want to do is they want to say to me, oh, I can't drum and I can't sing. I'm just letting you know that I'm not able for this. Yeah. You know, you're nodding because you've had that, haven't you?
Yeah.
People want to go, so they want to say to you in advance, don't expect anything from me. You know, don't expect anything. So my role as facilitator is, you know, to say to everybody, listen, I absolutely know you can sing. I know you can drum. You know, whatever you present to me is perfect. There's no such thing as wrong. There's no mistakes. You can't sing anything wrong. You can't play anything wrong. And I very clearly say to them, you know, if you think your voice is wonky, then that's fantastic, because I love wonky voices, because your wonky voice can be the icing on the cake of the harmony that we need to make this beautiful. So in other words, I'm immediately saying to them, this is a space where everything is welcome. You're welcome. The chaos you bring with you is welcome. The chaos you bring physically, verbally, energetically, musically, emotionally, I can handle it. I've got your back. And that's a word I use often, is it's okay, I've got your back. So and I say those words, and I'll say to them, it's fine, you know, there's no such thing as a mistake, and then, you know, and I just give it a go, experiment, see what you're capable of, you know. And I have this particular song that I do where I say to them, somebody else take on the call and response, and no matter how tiny your voice is, no matter if it's only a whisper, we'll hear you and we'll respond. You know, be brave. So from the very get-go, I have their back as a facilitator. And it's a verbal. And the most important thing is, I genuinely have their back. I genuinely want each person in that room to have the same experience I had when I walked in 20 years ago to that room in the very first workshop. You know, that's what I want.
And it goes back to almost how we kicked off with personal responsibility, ethics, and awareness. But as your sessions develop and a session starts to develop, what do you use? What do you feel? How do you read the energy of the group, where you feel that they want to go in a direction, or do you know what I mean?
Okay, that's a good question. So what I do now is I dialogue with the group. You know, so it's a very important thing. Remember, I'm not, most of my groups are groups that I work with on a regular basis. So I run like recovery programs, again in the psych unit, and again in the prisons, again, you know, the mental health settings, schools, whatever. I tend to run 6 to 8 week programs. So I have a relationship with the groups. I tend to do very few groups where I go in and do a hit and come out again. But even if I do, you know, a community group, I will still dialogue with the group, and I'll say to them, you know, how's everyone doing? Are we okay? We might do something, and I'll say, how's everyone doing? How's everyone feel about that? You know, so I'm in constant communication with the group, but I'm not doing it secretly. I'm doing it quite openly. And I'll say to the group, you know, I'm going to move to this now, and it might, you know, this might be a bit challenging and people might feel a bit fearful, but give it a go. I've got a particular method where I call the hot seat, where, you know, so I say to them, we're going to go somewhere scary now, but you know what? It's up to you. You have a choice. You can do this or not. You know, you can participate at whatever level. So in other words, I am in constant communication with the participants. We are on a journey that's collaborative. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I really get that. And I kind of just want to kind of move on with the experiences that we've had as drummers and facilitators and working in various fields. There's a whole lot of kind of paperwork out there and scientific reports. And this is a question I'm going to take through everyone that I work with, that I'm going to interview and chat to, is that we're kind of aware of all this kind of remote examples, this remote paperwork and scientific reviews about the benefits of the work that we do. What are your actual kind of visceral, your first-hand witness accounts of kind of the benefits of some of the stuff that we go out there and do?
Okay, so what have I witnessed? How do I know it's working, what I do?
Yeah, what are your personal experiences of that?
Yeah, that's such an easy question to answer, but so difficult to synopsize, because I am 20 years doing this, and I have never, ever, ever, ever come out of a workshop and not seen magic. And magic is the only word I can use. I have seen people, so first of all, on a community level, people have a sense of community, and actually friendships have developed out of workshops, and that's a major thing. People have met each other. People who were isolated have met each other and made friends. That's a major thing. Two, the sense of well-being that people come out of, as in, gosh, that's, they're on a high, or they have this satisfied sense of they've taken part in something. It's a satisfaction. People know that when you drum, it's like something very deeply feel good about it and uplifting. There's a sense of achievement. People will say, God, I never knew I could do that. And like, I'll say to a group, group of strangers, I'll say, did you think that when you walked into this room an hour and a half ago, that we would make such amazing music? And they will always say, no, I had no idea that I had the ability to make that music. So what they're going away is they're going away with a sense of, man, I did not know I could do that. They're musicians. Because you see, we're so used to being passive observers of musicians. We listen, we're watching, but this is an opportunity to go, you know what, you are the music maker. You are the one. And take that away. It's so satisfying people to go, wow, I did not know I could do that. Like me, 20 years ago, I did not know I could do that. That I had the potential to make that music. And I think mentally, especially with the work I do in the prisons, I remember the counsellor saying to me one day, and I've been working in a particular prison for a good few years, and the counsellor said to me one day, I don't know what you're doing in that room, she said, but I'm seeing it in my council room. She said, the men are coming to me. It's a men's prison. The men are coming to me, and she said, their drumming is giving them such a sense of release and calm, and, it's a way of releasing their anxiety. So she said to me, she physically saw the difference in the men who were coming to the drumming workshop, So there's so many levels that it works on, and often it's life-changing. I mean, I say this to groups, somebody's life is going to be changed because my life was changed 20 years ago. And I've seen it. I had a young lad that came to me when he was maybe in his mid-20s. He came to my workshop and he was absolutely amazing drummer. And the minute he started to drum, I knew that he was hooked. And he's gone on now to do his own really amazing, powerful stuff. And that's happened to a couple of people, that they've gone on to do other stuff. It's changed their lives. So how can I put that into a synopsis? It's impossible, because it is so powerful on so many levels. I have rarely seen anyone leave a workshop that hasn't had some impact on one of those levels, even if it's just simply a feel good, uplifted, wow, that was a really good fun, or God, I really relaxed, for that. It's so many levels, that it works on, so many levels. It is a powerful tool.
Absolutely. How do you see your role in the session?
How do I
see your role in the session? What is your role when you've created your space and the group are doing their thing, whatever that is? How do you see your role? How do you see it develop through the sort of the beginning of a session to the end of a session?
How do I see my role? So in a sense, I am the one who's guiding the space. My role is it's a process, it's a method. I have a method that I use. As I said it to you before, it's from the out of the circle to the inner of the circle. And I have a time scale. And I know where I want to go. I might have 3 or 4 different methods to get there, but I know where I'm going. So my role is to read the group, to see, and actually to see how far I can push the group safely. Can I push them safely? Can we push our boundaries a little bit more? Can we go here? Can we? So that's my role. I mean, my role is to give the group the richest experience that I can, and possibly the deepest experience, because I want them to experience a safe sensuality.
But there's a sense of finesse, isn't there? There's a sense of finesse and understanding that you may have a feel and a read of where we could go, but an understanding and a finesse of where they're willing to go.
Yes, and that's the skill. I think that takes a lot of skill as a facilitator to be able to make those judgments and read a group, and while staying safe, keeping a group safe, and yet knowing, you know, how far to push them, you know, what language to weave into it, you know, to bring a deeper, richer experience. Because I often, in the group, if I'm doing something, I will weave in language, you know, of well-being, and language of, I mean, I stay away from language of sacred or religion, but I will weave in a language of spirituality, you know, whatever that is, you know. But I most definitely will weave in a language of connectedness and sacredness, and, you know, the earth, and the importance of supporting each other, and the non-judgmentalness of, allowing people to just be who they are. And I'll weave in that kind of language. You know, there's most definitely a responsibility. You know, I know what. You know what? I'm kind of lost in the answer now.
Yeah.
Ask me something else.
No, I want to stick with it, only because I'm just aware that I always tend to feel that my role kind of starts at one end, and then actually starts at like that, and kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more the session goes on, and I become less significant. I don't know if less significant is the right word, but less important or whatever as the session kind of develops. And we go back to what we were saying before, or what I was saying before, about finesse and understanding and reading, knowing that this group can be moved on, but I'm aware that they don't want to because they're really happy where they are, or I know where that boundary is.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that means that the participants in the group are confident enough to actually explore leadership themselves within the group. Yeah, that's a really good facilitator.
Yeah.
It means that you can let go of the reins.
They can lead themselves almost.
They can lead themselves, yeah. And that's a really, if you're in that space, then you've succeeded in something very powerful, because you're not holding on to the reins going, I'm the facilitator, and I'm, you know, it's creating a space for people to experience leadership and experience their own strengths and power within that space. You know, like I've often had groups where somebody else might start a song, and I will gladly say, excellent, you know, and let them take over, or somebody else might start a particular rhythm or something, and, you know, I have no problem. I love that when people push themselves a little bit forward with leadership, and you know, and when a group is almost working itself, that's just such a superb, that's facilitation.
That sense of empowerment, that sense of personal empowerment you've given them.
Yeah, they're not looking to you for permission to do anything. They're not looking to you to tell them what to do next, because they know when you're in that space, and that space is filled and vibrant with potential, they know that they can step forward and add something to the group, because you as a facilitator they know that this is the creative, its permission is there for each person, you know, to have that freedom and liberty to lead in the group.
No, absolutely.
It's not control.
No, totally. It's virtually the exact opposite.
The exact opposite, yeah.
So, I mean, you work with a huge number of different groups, as you say, from mental health to prisons to community to women's retreats. Do you find you need to vary your style, or does your style vary with each of these groups, or do you stay true to a core?
Do you know what? No, it doesn't, because I think what I have developed is a particular method and a couple of tools within that work with every single group. You know, I've just seen it work with every single group. You know, obviously I'll adapt to different, but the method that I have developed over the years that I now work from it's not a one size fits all, because you still have to obviously within that adapt to the group. But I've seen it work. I mean, I have a thing called rhythm stew. You know, I said that to you before, we fold in rhythms, and then I have a thing called the hot seat, and there's a few other particular methods that I have, and they just work. They work with every single group. So in a sense, that's possibly why I don't do as much kind of pre-planning anymore. I just literally walk into the group, kind of assess it and go, I'll try this. And, you know, let's go for this. And I mean, it literally is I have a spontaneous bag of tricks that I will just dip into. now. I think it's because I have so many resources that I've used in the past, and I see work that I don't need to plan. I'll just go, yeah, I'll try this one. I'll go there. I'll try that.
And I'm intrigued because what is the impact of all of this that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes? What impact has that had on you as a facilitator and a person?
Ask me that question a little bit differently, because it's not registering.
Sorry, give Ray. A lot. You give a lot, and you give a lot. No, that's not going to work. I just need to have a quick think about this. The work you do is empowering. It's deep. We've mentioned words of sacredness. You've worked with a huge panorama of different groups. What have they given back to you? How have they changed and molded?
So what am I getting from this?
Not in a financial or a kind of pragmatic way, but how have you grown from what this work has done?
Have I grown? Oh, crikey. How have I grown? Oh my goodness. I've done an awful lot of work over the years. You know, I was heavily involved in social activism, and I've done an awful lot of work with refugees and asylum seekers. And how have I grown? I think I've just become so non-judgmental of humanity on so many levels. You know, I've just put so many people through my hands that you know, I think I've just become so compassionate because I've just seen so many people struggle, and so many people, everyone comes with a story, and everyone comes with, you know, some kind of hurt or trauma or baggage or anxiety. And I think it's just made me hyper aware, you know, of taking people where they are at, you know, not being judgmental, seeing the best in people. It's just, I think it's very hard to answer that question, because, I mean, it's formed who I am, but I don't know whether that's a difficult question to answer. It's a difficult question to answer, you know. In a sense, it's my identity. You know, people have me in their phone as Debbie Drum.
Yeah.
You know, I think I said to you before, the time when I was very ill in 2013, and I, you know, I thought that my career was over. And I remember when I came out of hospital thinking, oh my gosh, my business will be gone now, because I was out of action for 6 months, and thinking, who am I going to be? I've spent so many years being Debbie the drummer, Debbie the facilitator. Who am I? Now, little did I know that, you know, not only did my business come back, but it came back like a tsunami. It's like everyone just held their breath and waited. Thank God, waited for me. But there was that moment of, who am I if I'm not Debbie the drummer? Who am I? So that question is difficult to answer you, because I actually don't know who I am without this.
I think you've answered it.
Have I?
Yeah.
Have I?
Without a doubt. So I'm now going to ask you my favourite question. They have all been my favourite, but this is a particular favourite. When you pack away your percussion and your drums and the other stuff that you've used as well, and place them in the back of your van, shut the van doors, get into your van, what do you hope you've left behind with the people of the workshop?
Okay. So I don't hope anything. I said that to you already. I don't hope anything. I absolutely know, without a shadow of a doubt, what I've left behind, because I've seen, I know that the tools I'm dealing with are too powerful, they're just such powerful tools that I know that everyone in the room has come away with something. They've come away with exactly what they need.
What they need, yeah.
You know, and in a sense, I can't control what each person gets out of it. I can't control what each person takes away. But what I do have is I have 100% faith and trust in the actual process, in myself as a facilitator, in the tools that I'm using, in the music, in the rhythm, in the sounds, in the connection. So what each person takes away is entirely what each person needed to take away. I trust the universe in that way. That sounds so hippie to say that, but I absolutely trust the universe in that way. But because I know what I'm dealing with, I know the power of what I'm dealing with, and I know that every person will get what they need out of that circle, because I've given my best. I've given my best. I've gone into that space with 100% awareness, 100% authenticity, compassion, clarity, boundaries, intention. I have given it my best. So what each person takes away after that, I can only hope that each person takes something that's valuable to them. But that after that, in a sense, it's not my business. I know that's a strange answer. It's a strange answer, I know, but does that make sense?
It does.
I'm not in control of what each person takes away.
No, absolutely.
I've given my best, and what they take away is what they need.
Yeah.
I can't control that.
But you have a trust in what you've done, that they would have taken away something, but it'd be what
Totally.
they actually need.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the power is out of my hands in a sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll draw a line under it there, Deb. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
You're welcome. That's really, really lovely to chat to you. This is my favourite topic.
Yeah, I would never have guessed. Take care, Debbie. Thanks very much.
All right, take care, everybody. Thanks a million.